Welcome to Unabridged Bookstore's virtual space. Tonight we are so thrilled to have Emery and Jason June with us to celebrate the release of Mute Cute Diary. We've been excited about this book for a little while, and we are glad that it is finally available out in the world, and excited to hear what you all think about it. Because this is a virtual event, I just want to remind everybody that we're not meeting in person, but we are still excited to hear from these authors tonight. If you are having any technical difficulties, I'll be on hand to help you with those. Otherwise, feel free to sit back and relax and enjoy hearing from these two. We're very excited to have Emery Lee, author of Meet Cute Diary. He is a kidlit author, artist, and YouTuber hailing from a mixed racial background. After graduating with a degree in creative writing, he's gone on to author novels, short stories, and webcomics. When away from reading and writing, you'll most likely find him engaged in art or snuggling cute dogs, which I can relate to, and I'm very excited to hear more about that. Joining for the conversation tonight is Jason June, a gay, genderqueer, list-making, Virgo Sun, Taurus Moon, Pokemon-playing writer living in Austin, Texas. If he had a gay agenda, marry the love of his life, be mom to two extremely pampered Pomeranians, and get accidentally kicked in the face by Kylie Minogue as an extra in a music video would all already be crossed off. We're also excited that Jason June's book, Jay's Gay Agenda, will be released in just a couple of weeks. So take a look at that too. The link you were sent has a link to pre-order that book or to read more about it. So we're so excited to have the two of you guys tonight. I'm going to turn it over so that we can hear more about Meet Cute Diary.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Emery. Thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel like this is, I was like, okay, like, if we're gonna like really kick off this like queer, like extravaganza, like you're like the perfect person to do it with. So amazing.
Thank you so much. All the rainbow hearts, unicorn emojis. I am so pumped to talk about Cute Diary. And just for a very quick, brief rundown, if anybody listening needs a refresher on the synopsis, the whole beautiful everything is in the title. We're following Noah, who runs the titular Meet Cute Diary, which is all about sharing meet cute stories of trans people. And it's so beautiful, it's so lovely, and then a freaking troll comes on and says all the stories are fake, which there's a little bit of truth to that, but Noah's heart is really in it. And then everything that unfolds as he tries to debunk the trolls. I just love this whole concept. And I love Noah. I love how snarky he is, how sweet he is, this perfect mix of both. But in his heart, you can feel how much he cares about his trans readers and spreading trans love. And that's giving me goosebumps just talking about it, literal goosebumps. It's so special and so endearing. And I just want to know, how did you come up with Noah, and how did you come up with the whole premise of Meet Cute Diary?
So I feel like Noah is like, I always say that he's just kind of like this embodiment of like the type of person that I used to be in high school, kind of that like naive, like idealistic like kid who has like all these big dreams, but he also is just like kind of like a chaotic mess. And so like I feel like a lot of that like messiness and that chaos was just kind of like inspired by like who I was, but also just kind of like the way like my brain works. My brain is like a disaster waiting to happen. So I just kind of like vomited it out on the page, and that's where Noah came from. But the whole concept of like the Meet Cute Diary was basically based around this scenario where a friend and I were on this road trip. And when we stopped in Colorado, we had gone to this really cute ice cream shop, and there was this guy, and like she was like stretching out, and like as she was like stretching, she like smacked into him, and I was like, bitch, that right there, that should have been a meet cute. Like that should have been a meet cute. And then it just kind of like clicked, like this idea of this kid who would like go around and like just see all these little mishaps in real life and be like, that should be a meet cute. And then turning this whole thing into like, which is kind of like funny, like how it almost like mirrors what I did, but it's just taking this like these like little happenings that seem like no big deal and just kind of blowing it into this huge story that ends up meaning a lot to people. So that was kind of where that whole like inspiration came from.
I love everything about that. And I love that it was this real life moment that you had envisioning what would happen to your friend if they got together. It's just so perfect. I love that.
Thank you.
And I love how Noah is aware of that. Like, I think maybe in media in general, when people are a little bit snarky, that audiences can misconstrue that for like self-centered a little bit, that they're too in their opinions or needing to voice that. But Noah totally does not do that. Noah is aware of what's going on around him while still being able to make his opinions, but seeing what could be happening for these other people. I just love that.
Yeah, like I think like it was a huge thing for me as I was kind of like working out the concept was I was like, I love the idea of this kid who's kind of like snarky and like dramatic, and he has this whole like definition of what love should look like. But he's also like a hopeless romantic. Like he's not one of those people who's like, no, like love sucks or like all romances end this way. And like I feel like there's a lot of that like snarkiness where it's like snarkiness mixed with like cynicism, and like it can work for like certain stories, but for mine I really wanted it to be where he was kind of just like, you know, like so naive and hopeful in a way while also still kind of like having that like jaded element. And so that's kind of like where that like balance kind of like came through.
Yes, I love it. It's so perfect. And I'm also really fascinated with Noah's fascination with beginnings, with that first meet cute moment, as opposed to other things going on. It's not like engagement stories, or it's not like promposal stories, to keep it kind of like teen related there. What do you think it is about that beginning that Noah loves and that you love and that really we all love? Who doesn't love a good meet cute?
Yeah, it's like I mean, I think to a certain extent, like we have this idea, or I say we, but what I mean is like those like romantics. Like you just have this idea of like this perfect relationship. And I think a lot of people like, you know, we get burned. We know people who've been burned. Like we know that there's like, you know, that relationships are hard and there it comes with a lot of like heartbreak and like pain and like a lot of like struggle. And so I think the idea of like being able to just know like out the gate, like be able to meet somebody and just have a connection like so magnetically strong and like perfect that you can immediately tell that person is like the perfect person for you. Like I feel like there's just so much like there's so much comfort in that. And just like the idea that like, you know, the universe is pushing you to this person. And so you know that you're not like making the wrong decision. You're not setting yourself up to get hurt. It's just that hope that you're gonna have like the perfect romance just out the gate. You can just tell like that is it. Like I feel like that's just I feel like it gives people a lot of like comfort in the face of like all this like, you know, how can I make sure that my I'm not breaking my heart again and again.
Yes, totally. There's some sort of comfort is the perfect word for it, where it's like this is almost predestined, not in a way that you don't have agency in how it shapes up, but just like realizing taking your agency to take the reins of this moment that the universe has given you. And I think that's so magical.
Yeah, and it's just like I feel like it just feels so I think a part of it's like that, like, you know, that Disney fairy tale happily ever after kind of thing you have. Like, I feel like the more you get enraptured by like how beautiful that story is, like you're just like, I want that. Like, I want something that's so perfect that I can just tell. You know what I mean? Where I don't have to like, and of course, like in real life, I feel like there's so much that you have to build on to build a strong relationship. But it's just kind of that hope that you could just, you know, just jump in and it'll just be perfect. Like, I feel like that's just so nice to think about.
Completely. And that Noah is very aware and accurate in a statement that we're not getting meet cutes about trans people in society in general. So like he has to fill this gap. And I want to talk a little bit about the real life inspiration, but the sort of fictionalized embellishment that Noah does here. And in my mind, like I totally got it right away, but then think it's interesting when the social media trolls start to come and say like, this is all a hoax, and sort of disregarding the fact that inspiration matters and like, and hope matters. So I guess maybe talk a little bit about like Noah's hope to bring these out, even though they're not completely 100% fictional, but why that's still so important to him.
I think, and of course, as a writer, I'm extremely biased because obviously I feel like fiction has a lot of power and that it means a lot to people. Otherwise, I wouldn't spend my entire life like churning out books. But I feel like, and I think it's funny what you said too about like social media. Like we're like, you know, we can see this story and immediately get why it's important, but then you'll see people on social media being like, well, you know, these stories are fake. How are like, why are they important if they're fake? And I think that's actually interesting because it's similar to the response that I've gotten so far about the book. Like I have a lot of people who will be like, wow, this book changed my life. It's so important. Like they're just seeing this, that I can have a happily ever after meant the world to me. And then I'll have other people be like, you know, it was cute, but like there wasn't really a lot of substance to it. It wasn't really like, you know, it didn't have the impact that I thought like a trans book like this would have. And I think part of it is just like it's just, at the end of the day, I think happily ever afters are often dismissed as like not that important. And I think if you see happily ever afters everywhere, then ultimately they don't feel that important because they're everywhere. But
Mhm.
like as a trans author and like a trans reader, like I don't see trans happily ever afters almost anywhere. So just to see one means a lot. Like the impact that it has is just so much greater because it's at this point, it's not that I need to be taught what a happily ever after looks like, or that I need to be taught that like, humor is okay and like, funny is okay. But like I needed that validation to basically be told like, but it's okay for you. Like you are allowed to do that. Because I think often we're kind of given this impression in media that like, yeah, like happily ever afters are great, rom-coms are great, but like not for you. Like
Mhm.
you're not the one who gets those. And so I think for Noah, that's kind of like where a lot of his motivation kind of comes from, is that he looks around and he sees there is nobody who looks like me getting these happily ever afters. And I think as somebody, he mentioned something about that too when he first meets Drew, and Drew was kind of like, what makes these stories so important? And Noah says, well, I'm standing in a bookstore right now. I can look around anywhere and I'll find a book that would show Drew his happily ever after. But
Mhm.
like, there's none of that for Noah. And I think that for him, that was like the biggest motivation, was just realizing like, if I'm not the one writing these stories, who is going to? And if people lose that, because this troll is now saying, well, these stories don't matter because they're unrealistic, then that will basically leave a lot of trans readers just kind of like hopeless. Like you reach a point where you start to feel like maybe you're not allowed to have happiness. And he was just very, I think, adamant on making sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think everything you say is so true. Like, we get so often cis, straight, and white readers saying, "Oh, aren't we over rom-coms? Aren't we over enemies to lovers? Aren't we over X, Y, and Z?" And it's like, well, exactly your point. You've seen yourself in it 1,000 times, cis, straight, white person. What about everyone else? Like, to get that hope that I think people take for granted, who are shown themselves as hopeful people in all sorts of media, that when you don't see that, it's like, well, does it even exist? Is it something I can have? And just the total mind fuck that will put you in, if it's okay to say that. Um, so I love that not only Noah does this, but that you're doing this, Emery. Like this is a love story for all of us in the real world, outside of Noah's world, to root for and cheer for. And as somebody who's not part of the ends of the binary, it's just magical. It's so great to see.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I think ultimately when I first started writing the book, I was just doing it to say that I could, because I think I had been so caught up in like, you know, these are the stories that are allowed to be told. Like I wrote that book when I was in the middle of the query trenches, and it was kind of like, okay, well, everyone wants rom-coms right now, but like, do they want like rom-coms with me? Like, do they want like my type of story? And so I think ultimately at the beginning it was kind of like, well, you know what? I'm going to write a rom-com and it's going to be about me. And then I think realizing, like, I think it's kind of funny because it's kind of like with Noah, like where he started writing this blog and it was just for funsies. It was just for him. And then like it took off. And then like, I feel like it was the same thing with me in this book. Like I wrote it for me. And then I was like, oh crap. Oh man, I'm so like, oh God, I am Noah. What have I done?
It took off, and now it's a book. Like, oh, it's really happy. I love that. And I love the framing of the whole, like the structure in the whole novel with the steps of love, the 12 steps of love. Where did these steps come from? Because I love them and I feel like they're so accurate. And was this just like entirely your creation? Was this like watching all kinds of rom-coms and writing down different beats? Like, how did that come about?
So it started off with me saying, okay, I want to write a rom-com, but I know that rom-coms get mislabeled all the time. Like there's so many books that get labeled rom-coms that are not rom-coms. And like there's so many like different conceptions of like what actually makes a rom-com a rom-com. So I did like a deep dive. I was like, looking at some of my favorite books, my favorite movies. I was like doing like going through like people's blogs, like tearing apart like what the most important parts of like every rom-com is. And like as I was kind of like putting all of it together, I was like, okay, here are the things that are pretty consistent. Like these beats, even when they aren't necessarily highlighted in every rom-com, like they're generally present in every single one.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh, well, in that case, what if I make it like a whole like almost like a caricature of like that rom-com where like it's literally all the right beats, but now we're turning it into almost like a parody where it's subverting them while also still making them happen at the same time. I don't know why that seemed like a good idea to me at the time, because like talking it out loud, I'm like, that sounds like a horrible idea. Why would you do that? But then it worked. So I guess it was a good idea.
I'm doing. It worked so well, especially because not to give any spoilery comments for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but we're getting these whole beats of the 12 steps with Noah and Drew, and that's kind of like how the book is structured. But then without quite labeling it, there's also those beats with Noah and Devin. And so I'm writing down in the margins, I was like, okay, wait, this is the hand of fate for like all these other parts of their story too. And really loving seeing how that was happening without it being so clear in Noah's head that these things are happening, and finding out how the universe is making these 12 steps still occur anyway. That was so fun.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like when I first started writing it, I was like, okay, yeah, like I have these 12 steps with Drew. And then I was like, okay, well, like, as I introduced like this other character, I was like, wait a minute. Can I still make the 12 steps happen in like a completely different scenario? And so it's like kind of funny because I feel like to a certain extent, it's almost like they're still the steps, but they're also like not the steps, like meet puke instead of meet cute, and like that kind of like where it kind of like it's a little bit off, but it's close enough. Yeah, and it's just, and I love the hilarity of just Noah not realizing that. Like he's here, like I'm the master of all things romance, and then like he can't even see his own steps when they're actually at work. Like this kid.
Yeah. And the best part about the meet puke, that's the perfect term for it, is that's even a more, not necessarily a more impactful story, but that is such an impactful story that is really going to stand out compared to a meet cute where it's like, oh, that's sweet, you met in an ice cream shop. No, we met because he vomited all over me on my first day of work. There's a scene in the agenda also that has a spew tsunami, as we put it. So I felt kindred in writing these puke scenes together.
I'm like, I was like, I think puke is slowly becoming my brand because I include it in too many things, and that's so unfortunate.
I love it. That is so funny. While we're on the topic of rom-coms, before we switch to other things, do you have a favorite rom-com? Because I mean, you wrote this so well that I feel like you've got to be a rom-com connoisseur.
Like I feel like, and I'm so bad at people asking my favorites because my favorite like rotates based on like whatever mood I'm in that day. But I feel like lately I've been on like a To All the Boys like high. Like I just love like those movies and this book. They're just so good, like just amazing. But like I think one of my all-time favorites is Clueless. Like I feel like that movie just like shaped my entire like childhood. So I feel like I pull some inspiration from that movie.
And might I remind you, it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty. The best line ever. It's so good. I love that one.
So good.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, was just the intensity of that can be social media, where the sides become like so clearly like stated and polarized from the start. It feels like when something goes down the internet, like with Noah, the blog getting called out for making fake stories, and people instantly being like, I'm okay with the blog as it is and I'm gonna stay, and others being like, no, I'm getting rid of the blog right now, unfollowing, unsubscribe, and you would better unfollow and unsubscribe too. So I wanted to talk about like, how do you deal with that as Noah? And then also just like in real life, because I feel like there is a lot of stuff that happens online where we're giving our opinions, and it feels like people might sometimes put more weight on it than we're actually meaning to say, or might be like catapulting something in bigger than when we were trying to start an actual thoughtful conversation. And how do we just like deal with all of that?
I mean, social media is hard. And like, I always say, like, I feel really bad for people who like feel pressured to be on there and just kind of like go on there because somebody else said they need to be on there, because I can only imagine how much harder it is if that's not something you actually feel comfortable doing. Like for me, I grew up on social media. I've been on like Tumblr or Twitter or some variation of it since I was like 12. So like I feel like the beats and like the motions, like I've been booed out of fandoms before. I've been chased off of websites. I've had all these types of troll campaigns. I've gotten the death threats. I've gotten the Nazis. I've gotten all of it like over the course of, a little over a decade. Like, and I think to a certain extent, it's like, I feel like it's two things because social media is all encompassing, but it's also nothing. Like it's everywhere and we get so involved in it. And when you're on there, it feels like it's everything. But at the same time, like getting out of social media is just turning off a button. It's like, and I think sometimes you just have to step away. And that was like when I was writing Noah and like his whole situation with the blog, I really wanted to emphasize like something an edit that had been suggested to me was, can Brian find out about the blog? So that can kind of like bring them closer together. And I said, no, because I actually really feel like Noah needs somebody who knows nothing, who has zero connection whatsoever to anything happening online. And because that means that every time things go out of hand, every time things are haywire, like he can go watch anime with his brother, they can go to lunch, he can do whatever. And like for a moment, he is completely safe from anything that's happening online. And I think that that's really like important for anybody who's like building a social media following and just like a presence, is just to have that separation of like in real life and online. And like, not to say that you can't have like, friends in real life who are your friends online and that kind of stuff, but it's just more so that you need to have that distance, because there will come a time when people will blow something out of proportion. And like, I mean, I know there was like a meme going around for a little while that was like, what's like the most ridiculous thing you got like dogpiled for? And like, I've been dogpiled for so many unnecessary, like completely irrelevant things, like just being like, oh, I thought this movie was kind of corny. And then all of a sudden people are losing it, and it's like, no, yeah. And it's like, don't get me wrong, like there are discussions and like opinions on social media that are expressed that are big. And that, I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea of like, well, last week we were talking about genocide and therefore we're all really like, stressed and this is a big thing. And then, they turn around and they'll see a movie and be like, and bring that same energy. So I do think people kind of blur the lines between one, reality and social media, but also just like topics on social media and how to handle different like things that happen on social media. So I think it's really like important to just kind of take that step back and have that space and have that like, that place that you can retreat to. Like right now, I haven't been online a whole lot in the past like 5 days or so. And I'm going to be offline for a while because I've been having a lot of like personal life stuff. And of course, like the book coming out. Right. And so I think just being away, you kind of like remember, oh yeah, that's like a different world. Like that is not everything.
I think that was really such a great answer and like so smart that you didn't do that suggested edit of having Brian become this insightful person about the blog too, and just being that safe space. And I also really loved that Noah took that time to step away. Like, I loved seeing the growing inbox messages to know like, he's not going to just jump in before he's really thought about this. He like does the right thing for his blog instead of just kind of like not thinking about it and just going on initial instinct. He's gotten to where he is by putting his heart into these stories. So he's got to put his heart into how to fix this. And I thought that that was so refreshing, or it was just like, okay, we're going to think about this. We're going to take this slow. We're going to post things with Drew and we'll see how it goes. I love that.
Yeah. And like, I think, and of course, like the thing with social media is I think it's not one size fits all. Like the way it works for every individual is going to be different. And I think that was kind of like something that I felt like with Noah too, was just kind of making sure that like he was doing the things that worked for him and like what would make him most comfortable. And that just logically made sense for him. Like Noah is the type of person who will ignore a problem until it blows up completely. And so, I was like, I don't want him here, like, jumping into these things. Like he's the type of person who needs that like space. And even I think because he is like the type of person who gets so invested in things, I don't think he realizes, or I don't think he realized how much he needed somebody who was completely separate from the blog. But it was kind of like, that is something that he really did need. Like it was just so important for him to have that.
Yes. And I love that he is sort of not a dichotomy, but he shows so well that you can have seemingly contradictory aspects of yourself exist in the same person, where at one point he says to Brian, like, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's not real. And then at the other time being like, I need to also have some time away from the internet. Like that was so beautiful because so often it's like, it's this or that in life. But it's rarely this or that. So often as humans, we have contradictory aspects of ourselves. And that just really made me relate to Noah so much. That was so well done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think something that I love the internet. Like I love the internet. I love the opportunities it provides. But I think it's so weird sometimes with YA where I feel like you'll have either people whose entire life is the internet, or you'll have people who are like, I'm too good for social media. I don't need that. And I'm like, I think for a lot of people, like especially people growing up now, like the internet is a huge part of your life. Like it to act like you never use social media at all is like, that's rare. Like it's not a super common experience. But at the same time, I think sometimes we can over glorify social media. And I think that's dangerous. And it can kind of set people up to, have these expectations or behave in these ways that are not healthy in the long run. So I think it's kind of like important to kind of like recognize where like social media can be like a great thing, but can also be a little bit toxic.
Right. Completely. And it's just like anything, right? Where there's like good and bads of anything and too much of anything where it's like, I need to move. Oh my God. I have to tell you my absolute, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I'm going to say my favorite person in this whole thing is Devin. I just love Devin so much. And I love not only through Devin, but through also that you're exploring gender and you're exploring pronouns. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're talking about how Noah likes to have his comfort and have this, like his brother, be a safe space and have spots that can be comfortable. But I also like that he prioritizes others' comfort. So like with Devin, I literally went, yes, when Noah said, they're your pronouns, you can have whatever pronouns feel right to you, and you don't have to have it figured out right now. And it was just so refreshing and lovely to just see this, like, we're not gonna make a big deal about it, and Devin, please explain to me why you're gonna go to EM now. It's just like, no, this is you and this is your heart and you're showing it to me. And I just want to talk about that whole thought process for you as you're writing them down and what that discussion meant to you. It was just beautiful and great.
Thank you. I mean, I think a lot of it for me just kind of stemmed from, I personally use neopronouns, and like getting to that point, like I've kind of danced around, like maybe I want to use something else, maybe I want to use that. And I think that whole like exploration of like your gender and your identity is so personal. And so it inherently makes you very vulnerable when you open up to somebody and say, like, I'm considering this being my identity, but I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a lot of, you're giving away a lot of power when you say, I'm not sure who I am. Like, I want you to help me figure that out almost.
Yeah.
Because I think we're expected to know who we are. And when we don't know who we are, people tend to be like, wow, what's wrong with you? How do you not know who you are? Like, or they'll say something like, oh, you must be making it up then if you don't know. Like, you have to know. And I'm like, in my experience, most people don't know. Like, most of us go through a good long exploration before we say, I think I know. So I wanted to kind of show like that, not only like, Devin's exploration of like, who am I and like what feels comfortable for me, but just what it means to have somebody there who will say, do whatever is comfortable for you. Like, if you're comfortable with that, then do that. Like, if you're not, then we won't do it. Like, it's up to you. Because I think, especially I think with a lot of cis people, when you say something like, these are my pronouns, it becomes, well, what does that mean? Why are you using that? Why do you feel like that's important to you? Explain all this stuff to me. And it's like, sometimes you're like, can you just like support the fact that I'm going to do this and we can get to questions later? Like, can we not? Or like, you can Google that on your own time, maybe. Like, but I think, especially I think when it comes to fiction, like so many people don't know that these pronouns exist. They don't know how gender exploration works. And so picking up a book may be the first time they've ever heard of somebody using like neopronouns, or the first time they've heard somebody talking about like what it means to explore gender, how that process works. So I think to show a healthy exploration and to show like what it actually means to be an ally and support somebody who is kind of making that journey, I think was really important to me, especially in a book that I knew was, going to be a trans title that would be like centered on transness. But then also just kind of like a book that's about happiness, because I don't think that finding new pronouns or exploring identity markers has to be a struggle or something that's, stressful or upsetting. Like it can be a lot of fun and it can be really validating and it can just feel really like gentle and loving when somebody supports you and all of that. And so for a book that was about transness and not trans trauma, but very much about trans happiness, I wanted to show those things in that kind of positive light so that people would realize, oh, this can be a good thing. Like if I'm going through this, I should find those friends who are going to treat me the way Noah treats Devin, not those friends who are going to like, grill me with 100 questions or make me feel like I'm making it up.
Exactly. And I love that you touched on that about the fact that like through Devin, people accusing M of making up their experiences before when they were trying to discover, well, am I a trans girl? What is happening? And that is such a real life thing, that it's such a luxury to know that the body you're born in and the gender society assigns you is where it's at for you. That's so nice. But when you realize that the experience of humanity is infinite and how we can express our gender and sexuality, but then knowing that the one option for your assigned birth or assigned sex at birth is not for you, can be so tumultuous, and you don't have all the answers, in large part because there's not language to describe how we're feeling, like literally not sometimes. And so Devin just being able through Noah to figure out who he is and play around, and not play around in terms of it not being serious, but trying different things on was so amazing. Like I didn't figure out I was genderqueer until I was 32. And I knew that there was something different about me in terms of my gender, and that just saying that I was gay wasn't enough for encompassing my whole being. But I needed those decades to figure that out, and I'm still figuring it out. And I just love that Devin shows it's okay to figure it out, and Noah's allyship shows like, yeah, you can be on this journey, and I'm going to be here for you. And when you have something that you want to say, I'm going to be here to listen to it and not try to like doubt you or make you feel like that's wrong. And it was so amazing.
Yeah, and I just feel like, and for me personally, like I first realized that I was genderqueer in college because I had a friend who's non-binary, and like going through the motions, like from college, like to now, like as I've explored my gender, as I've tried on new pronouns, my friends have been extremely supportive. Like they've, of course, like they trip up, they make mistakes, but they're all very supportive. And now I have another friend who's considering maybe they're genderqueer too, and we're all doing it together. And it's this, I feel like it's this fun exploratory thing. Like we'll buy each other pride flags and pronoun pins, and we're just doing it all together. And I think that, so often media, it's this whole like thing where like, 15-year-old realizes he's trans, and all of a sudden his parents are kicking him out of the house. And like, there's all this like trauma and this like pain. And it's like, of course that's real. And of course that happens. And like, that's something that needs to be like acknowledged and viewed. But I also think that sometimes for a lot of trans kids or even just trans adults, we have this like fear because the only thing we've ever been shown is when you come out, it's going to suck. And like, there's going to be bigotry and everyone's going to be mean to you. And like, you kind of don't even know that you can look for those people who are going to support you in everything you do. And I feel like that's something that people like need to see more of.
It was so beautiful and so perfectly done. And another thing that I thought was so well done was through Noah and showing how a lot of us are figuring out our gender through our like fashion, the accessories we have around. Like I love him talking about putting on vests and wanting to look a little bit fancy, like when he's going in for his job interview and how to dress for that, or contemplating like what happens when I'm at camp and we're going to go swimming. I don't want to wear a bikini. I'm going to get a binder. And it's not a big thing where he feels like just so tumultuous about it. He's just like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try this. I'm going to get this. This is what it's going to be. And I love that. And I wanted to explore like kind of accessorizing and our style and how that helps us discover our gender.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, like things in society are so heavily gendered, like especially things like clothes and like hairstyle and like makeup and like stuff like that. There's this clear line of, oh, like if you're a woman, you do this, if you're a man, you do that. And so I think to a certain extent, like there's this interiority where like this voice in your head kind of tells you like, this thing is gendered. Even when you know it's not gendered, there's like this little like, maybe it is, I don't know. And so I think when you start to shed the like binaries of gender and you start to shed like these like preconceived notions of what gender actually looks like, you start to realize that like playing around with these things and kind of like mixing them and bringing them in and like using them in certain scenarios and not in others, like it can be so validating to how you're feeling, like in terms of gender. Like for instance, I love wearing makeup when I'm feeling masculine. And it's just, I feel like I can shape my face in a way that feels like perfectly masculine while still giving like that like highlight that just like gives me that like, you know, that just a like touch of femininity that I'm looking for. Like, and it's just, it's lovely. And I feel like, you know, to be able to, you know, dress in a certain way that might feel more masculine, or but then do my hair in a way that feels more feminine, or like vice versa. And just kind of like to play around with all of that. I feel like it gives you this like feeling of like power. Like I am above these like rules that society has set for me. Like I can be whatever works for me. And that's, I just feel like it's so liberating.
Yes, I completely 100% agree. Like it does feel like you're breaking the rules, even though these rules are totally arbitrary, but that is so empowering. Like I have my long hair because it lets my femme self shine, and I feel like I feel like I'm finally myself with it. Or like during quarantine, trying to figure out how to do eyeshadow, which is something that like I could not go into Nordstrom or Sephora and have them teach me how to do it without it being a thing. And so like to finally have that, it's just like I feel like I'm becoming myself. And some people I think could trivialize that and say, well, you're just being materialistic, or you're not understanding gender because you're reducing it down to material goods. But it's so much deeper than that. And I just love that Noah shows that.
Yeah, it's just, it's, I feel like in a way, like it's all about laying claim to these things and saying like, society, you can't tell me I'm not allowed to use this anymore. Like you're not allowed to tell me that like this, like I have the right to use that. I have the right to like where I feel like it's the same thing as like bathrooms. Like I know people will talk a lot about like, you know, using the right bathroom. And it's like, look, honestly, if it's a toilet, I can use it. But like the ability to say like I am welcome in a space, you know, that affirms who I am. Like I feel like that just means a lot to be able to lay claim to that and say, this is mine. Like I am allowed to be here. And I think especially like we're often told to like make ourselves smaller, don't draw too much attention. So just to be able to have like in the way that you express yourself and your makeup and your jewelry and like your clothes, to be able to be like, this is mine and I can use this and I'm allowed to use this as much as feels comfortable for me. I feel like that's really powerful.
Yes, 100%. I am here for that. I want it on a shirt. So we're getting some questions in from the audience here. And the first one is, what was the most challenging and also the most fun part of writing Meet Cute Diary?
Oh God. Okay. So the hardest part was the pacing because I'm horrible at pacing and I basically, and it's not even like, how did you get the pacing right? I didn't. I have an editor. So I did not get the pacing right. It's like, I feel like I love writing books that take place in a set amount of time. So like in this case, it's over the course of a summer. But like, how do you make things equally valuable throughout the course of a summer? I don't know. Ask my editor because she fixed it for me. As far as like the most fun part to write, I really loved writing like the dates that Noah goes on. I feel like there were just like the perfect combination of like cute and like funny and just like a little bit of like emotional like depth. And I feel like that just made it like those were just really like, and I feel like every time it would kind of start with like this whole brainstorming session of like, what would be really cute? Now, how can I make this funny? And then, okay, cool. And then we'll just like leave this poor kid and like make him like go suffer through it.
I feel like you did your dates so well. And then even having moments that were tender between Drew and Noah, or Devin and Noah, and having moments where I'm like, maybe that even qualifies as a date. Like they're so just so cute and sweet, and you do such a great job with it. So
Thank you.
very well done. Our next question is, what or who are your queer and trans literature inspirations?
Ooh, okay. So my number one queer inspiration is Adam Silvera, because he just does everything I wish I could do. And like, I'm gonna get there one day, but it's probably gonna take me a while because he's really, really good. But yeah, so he's amazing. Aiden Thomas, which like I feel like anybody who reads like trans books already knows Cemetery Boys is like amazing. Like it's like life changing, and it's just so good, like so good. Um, Becky Albertalli, not only because I feel like Simon Versus was one of the earliest queer books I ever read, but she's just an inspiration as a person. Like she's just genuinely like so kind. Like my brain struggles to process how kind she is because like she's just truly so kind. And I aspire not only to like have that kindness and like that consideration for other people, but just I feel like the way that she's so genuine with her fans, and so open about like her experiences. Um, I aspire to that. I think it's terrifying to do because there are so many people who will not respect your boundaries, and so many people who will treat you badly when you try to do that. But I think the way that she handles it is honestly like really inspirational. So I'm very moved by that. And I try to like channel her energy, but I don't think I get anywhere near it. So
I totally second all those authors that you named, and also all your observations about Becky's just generosity with everybody and how she is genuinely making the world a better place, which I feel like I know that neither of us is like at her point in the same point in our careers as she is in hers right now, but I feel like you are totally on that path, Emery, where you're making the world a better place. You are bringing love into this world. You are sharing how getting to be the center of attention or have the spotlight is something that every human deserves at some point in their life, and that's just magical. And you're awesome.
thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you.
It's the truth. So this kind of ties into something that Becky has experienced and that you've experienced when people have piled on you, like you mentioned before. But someone's asked, what advice do you have for people who are battling those internet trolls?
Oof. I mean, so I feel like I do have advice, but I feel like to a certain extent, like if anybody ever learns the answer to like defeating internet trolls, like I think we'll enter like a new age of like civilization. But I don't know if we're ever going to reach that point. And the first is I feel like determining if they're actually trolls or not. And the best thing I can suggest on that point is just get friends who will tell you, and be honest with you, like if you actually fucked up or if they're trolls. Because I see a lot of times where someone will voice like a valid complaint and people will say, oh, this person is a troll. And then they'll make it worse by saying all these horrible things about someone who's just genuinely asking a question, or trying to like clarify something. And so be careful. But like if someone is actually an internet troll, I feel like all you can really do is not give them the time of day. Like the whole thing with trolls, like what they want is to get a rise out of you. What they want is to make you miserable. And they're basically people who don't have lives and are just here to make you upset. And so I find the easiest thing to do is just block them. And if there's a lot of them, I will go on private for like 3 days and they'll eventually leave you alone because, like I said, they don't actually stand for anything. They don't actually care about anything. They're just trying to make you upset. So get your distance, protect yourself, and don't feel bad about it because they're just trying to make you upset. Like it's not worth it.
Yes, 100%. The block button is your friend. I love it. So we're almost out of time, it looks like. So I want to get to what's next for Noah and Devin and Becca and the whole crew. Are we getting more Meet Cute Diary moments? Are we getting more Emery Lee books? What's happening?
There's a lot up in the air at the moment. You will definitely be getting more Emery Lee books because I need to get paid. But so there will definitely be more Emery Lee books. As far as more Meet Cute Diary books, Noah's story is complete, and I always feel like that's important to like say up front. Noah's Meet Cute Diary was Noah's story, and I think you got that pretty fully in like the book. But I do feel like there are other characters, wink, wink, whose stories might not be completed yet. Namely, I don't know if this is like if I should be allowed to like talk about. I mean, there is nothing currently set in stone, but there are a couple characters that I'm thinking about revisiting, and currently the one I've been considering the most is Brian. So I will say that, and
I love that. I also loved Brian so much. He's just like, I don't want to use the word perfect because, you know, that puts a lot of pressure on Brian, but he is an excellent older brother, like always trying to be there for Noah, being there for Noah even when he doesn't know that Noah can hear him. And it is just, it would be really great to get to be with him for a while and just see like what made him him and what his hopes and dreams are right now in his life.
yeah, I feel like Brian put in so much work. Like, I feel like his back hurts from carrying Meet Cute Diary, and I feel like it's only fair that he maybe get his own happily ever after. So
I love everything about that. I also want to know, just in your mind, I don't know why I have this big concern for Becca. Loved the whole layer here of how you're maintaining your friendships when you move away, and how does it stay the same? How does it change? How do people get new characters in their life without spawning jealousy in the old characters from our lives, and not even keeping them like old characters? They're still present, but just digitally. And I just want to know, like, that she's gravy. Everything's good in Florida for her for a while.
Becca's doing all right. She's one of those people where I feel like you can throw her anywhere and she'll figure it out. Like, she's very much like the type of person who can, like, you know, put it all together. Becca's story is also not complete, so I mean, we'll see what happens there. But with Becca, I would love to get more exploration out of Becca's story. But I think my only thing with Becca is that I do feel like she's a little out of my lane to write, because I am not a Cuban lesbian, and so I feel like it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know that I would write a Becca POV book. But I would like to see more for Becca in the future. So we'll see where that goes.
I love it. I love it. And I totally understand that. There's one more question here. Oh, can you give us a little preview of Jay's gay agenda? It comes out June 1st, and it is all about Jay, our titular character, and his titular gay agenda, which is his romance to-do list. He grows up in a rural farming town, and while he watches all of his heterosexual classmates have their relationship milestones, he writes a list of the things that he wants to do when he meets another gay guy. And then, long story short, he moves to Seattle and meets gay guys, and then has to get to the list. So that's Jay's gay agenda. And I feel like there are so many characters that in Jay's world that would love to meet Noah, that he's just so fun. That I know Max would be a huge connoisseur of the Meet Cute Diary blog. He would love it.
I love that. I love the potential of, like, how could these books potentially, like, cross over? Like, what do you think these characters might be like which characters are friends with each other? Like, who's going for coffee on the weekend? Like, I love that.
I love it. It's so fun. Before we have to sign off, since this has been all about love, and I've loved every last minute of it, what are your favorite romance tropes? And what are you, like, most keen to write romance-wise?
Enemies to lovers. I've been like, I've always been enemies to lovers bitch, and I've been like telling people, like, I need to get my enemies to lovers books out there, because I feel like, I mean, I always have a little bit of, like, hate to love and, like, everything I write, but I'm like, I need enemies to lovers is my brand. Like, I need more of that. I also love, like, childhood friends to lovers, or like childhood friends to enemies to lovers. Anything with childhood friends, enemies, and lovers in there is good. And I love, like, forced proximity of, like, any sort. And, like, I love second chance romance. I think those are, like, so cute.
Those are all so perfect. I absolutely adore enemies to lovers. It is so great. Or childhood friends to lovers, where you just have that aha moment where it's like, oh my God, I'm actually in love with you. Had one of those moments myself in high school, but then obviously that didn't turn out. I was the only gay person in high school, or the out gay person in high school, at least. And I love fake dating. It's just so great.
So cute.
And before we wrap up, was there any questions or topics you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I think I'm like, ooh, what have we not talked about? I feel like we've like talked about like so much. I mean, I feel like I guess the only thing I would say is like, um, keep in mind, my sign off to everybody's like, keep in mind, Meet You Diary is a rom-com. Because I know sometimes people expect it to be a little more serious than it is, and it's not. It's very not. It's a comedy. But I will say that Meet You Diary may have been the most lighthearted book I've ever written. So I think it's all like downhill from here. Be prepared. Things are about to get a little dark, a little bit darker.
Like we said before, there are multiple facets in all of us, so we can get a little bit of that, or a lot of it, however much you want to give us.
Yeah, like we'll go from like, I'm like, let's start with like, I was like the fact that like the first book I ever published had to be like the single happiest book I've ever like conceived of, and I'm like, people are not going to be prepared for what comes next.
It's a dun dun dun.
Yeah, right. Just like dramatic, like clouds roll in and like lightning strikes. You're just like, good luck.
With love from Emery. Oh my God, Emery, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. Like when I got the note where you asked if I would do this, I was just like so happy. I literally squealed. This book is going to sit with me for such a long time, and I just love it.
Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you.
It's been so much fun. I will talk with you anytime and every time you want.
I'll like have you on like speed dial. Like, okay.
What do you think of this? Is that you up there, Matt? I see.
That's me. I just wanted to pop in also to say thank you to everybody who joined us tonight to hear about Meet Cute Diary, but also especially thank you to Emery and to Jason June for choosing to, join us virtually here at Unabridged. We're very excited that the book is available now. And so grateful that you came here to talk to us tonight. So thank you for appearing. Like I said at the beginning, I've put a little link in the chat here. If you haven't gotten your copy of the book yet, we've got them here in the shop. We're excited to get it to you. You can also use that link if you're interested in pre-ordering a copy of Jason June's book. We'll have those in just a couple weeks too. So yes, thank you both for coming. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And everyone have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.